As high-profile college sports continue to evolve, there are questions around the relationship that college athletes will have with their schools and the conferences that oversee their competitions. Players in popular sports are already getting paid and have opportunities to make money on their name, image, and likeness. But what about being recognized as employees or their ability to organize? These questions and more are being considered by policymakers in New York and around the country and were the subject of a recent panel hosted by the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies. For more on these issues, we're joined in the Capitol Press Room studio by a participant in that recent event, Richard Winsten, a lobbyist with the firm State Broadway. Thanks for making the time, Richard.
Oh, thank you, Dave, for having me.
Well, for starters, when you look at the existing landscape, does it seem like there needs to be additional guardrails at the state or federal level?
Oh, absolutely. I'm jumping out of my skin to say this. What you have now in this landscape, you have chaos. You have a ton of money that flows through this. You have a lot of people who need to have help with important things like compensation, medical care. And something needs to be done like now, because this is not like a looming crisis. This is happening right now because of the kind of out-of-touch aloofness that the NCAA showed in litigating almost every issue, whether it was NIL or antitrust issues, to the nth degree, and not rolling up their sleeves and getting in and trying to make relationships and fix things. And we have a situation now where it's completely lawless and it's crying out for guardrails and rules that will make lives better for athletes, for universities, for athletic directors, for coaches, for everybody involved. And I'm here as a fan. I'm a lobbyist, but I don't have a client in this particular issue, but I've learned a lot about it. And I think that the Szilagyi-Bailey bill, which takes the approach of making at least Power 4 revenue-generating sport athletes employees and giving them organizing and bargaining rights.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. You're referring to state lawmakers Mikhail Szilagyi and Jamal Bailey, the former of which was at your panel. And 5 years ago, we spoke with Assemblymember Szilagyi about the idea of ensuring a pathway for college athletes to collectively bargain, to form some sort of entity, whether as a team or their school or even a broader dimension. And again, this is 5 years ago, so this is not an issue that popped up overnight. Why is it important for the state to step in and sort of guarantee that right to unionize or right to collectively bargain? Is it something that could already be available to these students and it's just sort of ambiguous right now?
Well, here's the situation as I see it. Number one, in the Biden administration, there was a general counsel to the NLRB that issued a memo saying that college athletes at least in these sports are employees.
And this is the National Labor...
Yeah, and they have the right to organize and bargain under federal law. The first thing that the new general counsel of the NLRB did after the Trump administration took over was to rescind that letter and say that they're not employees. And so on the federal side, they're not taking jurisdiction. Congress is considering a couple of pieces of legislation, one of which is a ban on organizing a collective bargain. The other one is very analogous to the Szilagyi-Bailey bill. But given the political makeup of Congress, it's very, very unlikely that Congress will do anything on this anytime in the near future. And so that leaves you with the states, and the states being, as Justice Frankfurter said, the laboratories of innovation and democracy. There's a role for them to take here. And I had the experience of working for many years on legislation to create organizing and bargaining rights for farm workers in New York State. Farm workers were statutorily excluded from the National Labor Relations Act. And after many years of work, the state stepped in 2019 and covered them under the State Labor Relations Act. And I think what needs to happen here with college athletes is something analogous. I think the state needs to step in, bring rules, bring guidelines, make them employees statutorily, because that's necessary to trigger all these other things off, and lead the way. And the other states, Michigan, other states are moving in this area, and if the federal government wants to leave it to the states, then the states ought to step in and lead.
From a practical perspective, what's the universe of college sports that would actually, you think, need some sort of protection like this? Because I went to a Division III school. SUNY Geneseo was not necessarily where people were clamoring to join the basketball team, and no one was maybe clamoring to watch them. So is this just about those sort of high-profile sports, or is there a case to be made that we do want to think about all students more broadly as employees?
I think we want to think about them more broadly as employees. I certainly think for the football, college basketball, both men's and women's, and perhaps some other sports that are growing, there's definitely a revenue generation base that makes organizing and bargaining possible and desirable.
And that's an important point. You mentioned revenue generating, because at a lot of these schools, certain sports are kind of what support other school sports.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't realize, college football, next to NFL football, is the second highest rating television program in the United States. And the television contracts are now reflecting that. That's money that's flowing through the schools. There's plenty of money here to compensate athletes. But you asked a question about Division III. I went to Binghamton at the time. It was Division III.
Was the Colonials, the Bearcats then?
We were the Colonials then, the Harper Colonials.
Now you're really dating yourself with the Harper reference. Tony Kornheiser.
Yes, he was a contemporary of mine, actually. And I thought about going out for the team because I had played in high school, but I was done with the regimentation. I was too much of a hippie at that point. But nonetheless, thinking about those sort of Division III athletes and athletes in, more like Olympic sports, like gymnastics, swimming, whatever it might be, they need to be in New York State deemed employees to get workers' compensation rights. And why is that important? That's important because if they suffer an injury in practice or wherever, that might limit their ability to work in certain ways after the fact, they need two things. One, they need for lifetime medical care for that injury. And number two, they need some wage replacement benefit for their permanent partial disability. And in New York State, they would be entitled to up to 10 years worth of coverage. So I think, even if you're not talking about organizing and collective bargaining for a Division III program, you ought to be talking about workers' compensation rights for these people, because right now most college programs will provide medical care while you're an athlete in the college. Some go 2 years further out, much rare for anything beyond that. And in terms of wage replacement, nothing. And not everybody comes out of college, and does well in the job market. Some people need that wage replacement to get themselves transitioned to another kind of life. So I think those things are very, very important, and New York State ought to move in that area as well.
Should student athletes, though, be concerned with the idea that if the state does impose broad employee benefits, that it's going to make some of these sports just financially not feasible anymore, and then SUNY Binghamton's going to say, well, we don't have an interest in carrying XYZ team anymore? Yeah,
look, I mean, I don't know all the answers to that, and I can't speak for all the intricacies of every sport and every university and every college. You would hope there would be a place for these sports somewhere in the college mix going forward. Sometimes colleges go to what they call club teams, which are less involved. Look, the model in Europe is that the universities don't do any of these things with athletics, and people go into professional sports at the age of 15.
No, it's not going to fly here with our sports culture.
Right, but that's not here. So you have to figure out a way to roll up your sleeves and get into conversations and make these things work. And the last thing that I want to propose is anything that's going to bankrupt an athletic department or that is going to eliminate sports that people want to and can participate in. But I think there are ways to make all these accommodations and make all these things work out if you put your mind to it. If all you're going to do is litigate and oppose and stand aloof, then nothing good is going to happen, and there's going to be no progress. And that's where we've come to today, unfortunately.
Well, coming back to the panel that you were a part of, Were there any other ideas that were floated around for what the state can do or what the federal government can do that we haven't discussed here? I mean, has anyone surprised you with any sort of innovative ideas, or is the same sort of stuff getting recycled at this point?
I wasn't surprised, but we had a panelist who was an offensive lineman for Clemson University in South Carolina, right-to-work state, not a pro-union state. And he was there for 4 years, and what he kind of got out of that was there's a need for organizing, bonding athletes together, and giving them the ability to make a choice. Do they want a union? Do they want some other form of organization? How can they mutually aid each other? All these things are very, very important. And he described a typical, in-season week for him. 60 hours plus. 2,000 calories every morning for breakfast, going to class for 4 hours, trying to stay awake in class, position meetings, film sessions, knocking heads against, in his case, Dexter Lawrence for 2 years, all-pro nose tackle for the Giants until this week. And then at 11 o'clock, you fall into bed and get up the next day and do it again. And then on the weekend, you travel. And you know how travel can knock the heck out of you, even when you're not doing all these things. And you listen to this and you say, well, this is an employee. This is somebody who's having his terms and conditions dictated to him. And this is somebody who you can easily see being an employee and being compensated. He wasn't at that time compensated, but now with the name, image, and likeness litigation, with the so-called house settlement, which allows for so-called revenue-sharing payments, which the colleges are trying to frame as payments for marketing and not payment for play-to-pay. Give me a break, please. It's this whole new world, and there's a need to adapt in this whole new world. And the same formula may not hold true for football and basketball as holds true for gymnastics or swimming. Fine, let's have different arrangements for those sports. As I said, let's deem them to be employees for workers' compensation purposes. There's litigation in Pennsylvania in the Third Circuit, which some people think is heading for settlement, which will deem athletes from five colleges in Pennsylvania to be covered by the Fair Labor Standards Act, which covers minimum wage. Federal minimum wage, I think, is like $7.75 now, and overtime payments with some retroactivity attached to it. If that litigation settles, then you have to think about New York State. Well, should there be a floor for college athletes in New York State of minimum wage and overtime payments? Something that might be considered. There's so much happening and so much going on right now. And there needs to be an attempt to bring it all together, set some rules, get the various parties talking to each other in structured ways. A lot of people don't realize that there is something called a judicially recognized antitrust exemption through collective bargaining. And so if there were collective bargaining in New York State, then that situation would not be subject to the antitrust laws, and the parties could get together and hammer out agreements. And I think that's very, very important. And again, most people don't know it. And it's one reason, an important reason among many, why collective bargaining may make sense.
Well, plenty more to explore in this space, but unfortunately we're out of time now. We've been speaking with Richard Winsten. They're a lobbyist with the firm State Broadway. Richard, thanks for visiting us.
Thank you, David. As always, thank you very much.
Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell & Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com.